Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
There's been widespread public outcry in the United States after a photograph emerged of a man and his 2-year-old daughter lying face down in a river after drowning as they tried to cross the Mexican border into Texas. The image has sparked more anger about the treatment of migrant families in detention centres and the US government's border policies. When President Trump took office, just over 30,000 people were stopped by authorities at the border. After an initial decline, that number has increased to well over 100,000 last month alone. At least 283 migrants died last year on the US-Mexico border, according to officials. Human rights activists say the number's likely to be higher. Just to warn you, this report by our correspondent Caroline Hawley does contain the photograph that has emerged of the dead father and child.
Proud parents. This was the Martinez family. Oscar, the young father, had hoped to earn enough money in the US to build a house. His body and that of his daughter Valeria were found in the Rio Grande, which separates Mexico and Texas. They'd apparently given up hope of reaching the US through legal means. A shocking image has now emerged of father and child, not yet two, her head tucked into his t-shirt, her arm around his neck. The stark human cost of the migrant crisis.
You
see the river. It looks very calm. I think that's what gave the young man confidence to cross. But there's actually a lot of current in the river.
Oscar Martinez had apparently managed to cross the river once with his daughter. But when he went back for his wife, the little girl panicked and jumped in after him. They're the latest of hundreds to die in the past year along America's border. And for those who do manage to get into the US illegally, there's been fierce controversy over how they're treated. Children separated from their parents and new evidence of filthy conditions in detention centres. Amid the outcry, the head of US Border Protection has just resigned. He'd wanted more money to spend on detained migrants. Last night, the Democrat-controlled House of Representatives approved a huge emergency package of aid.
This situation is child abuse. It is an atrocity that violates every value we have, not only as Americans, but as moral beings.
Donald Trump has now hit back, criticising the Democrats on border security. He said they want open borders, which means crime, but we are getting it done, including building the wall. Earlier this year, Donald Trump declared an emergency along America's southern border, and this month he made an agreement with Mexico. Thousands of extra Mexican troops have now been deployed as the country cracks down on illegal migrants under pressure from Mr. Trump. But this is the flow of human desperation. Despite Donald Trump's tough stance, people keep moving north, crossing borders, heading for the United States despite the dangers. Propelled by misery and by hope. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
Our North America correspondent Chris Buckler is in Brownsville, Texas, on the US border. And this image of the father and child who have drowned is really shocking. Is it likely to change anything, though?
Yeah, there's no doubt of the power of an image to shock, and it has here in the US. But at the same time, it is worth noting that President Trump hasn't been tweeting about that picture today. Instead, he's been attacking the Democrats and what he regards as their open border policies. He continues to believe that tougher security and a border wall, barriers like this right along where America and Mexico meets, are more important to try and tackle the crisis here at the US border. But of course, there are communities that live very closely together here. If you take a look through the bars, you can see one of the official crossing points. And people go across there many times every single day. But below it is part of the river where Oscar Martinez and his daughter died. That again is tantalizing for some families who want to come here and to try to start a new life in America. The truth is, though, the fact that they want to do that also says something about the countries they're fleeing, and tackling those problems in Central America has to be central to any policy that is going to work.
Chris Buckler on the border there, thank you.
The shocking image of the bodies of Oscar Martinez Ramirez and his tiny daughter Valeria, who drowned in the waters of the Rio Grande as they tried to get to the USA, is, Senator Elizabeth Warren told this programme, a tragic reminder of the broken immigration system in Donald Trump's America. The southern border is already a key election battleground, with growing outrage over conditions in detention centres, particularly for unaccompanied children. Kieran Jenkin reports now from Miami, Florida.
On Monday, on the banks of the Rio Grande, they found 2 bodies reaching for US soil. She is tucked inside his shirt, her little arm around his neck. A father and his daughter, not yet 2 years old. Her name was Valeria, and from her family of 3, only her mother survived. In El Salvador, her grandmother said they last heard from their son on Saturday.
Mama, te amo, me puso.
He said, "Mama, I love you." I saw it, she says, as a sort of goodbye. More and more families fleeing Central America are finding their paths blocked. Grief is becoming a weary reality for those left behind. It's thrust America's border crackdown centre stage. For one of the front-runners ahead of the first Democratic TV debate, a defining issue. I've seen that haunting image from the Rio Grande. I wonder what your reaction was and who you think should bear responsibility for it.
So, it is a heartbreaking
hey guys,
image.
We're gonna have to get off the road,
and
so.
It is a reminder that we have a broken immigration system here in the United States that is maximizing pain and putting people at risk, and it needs to change.
This is where Senator Elizabeth Warren, currently 3rd in many polls, chooses to be, with the debate hours away, peering over the high fences into America's biggest detention center for unaccompanied migrant children. Around 2,000 young people are held here, behind the fortifications put in place by its for-profit operators. Lawyers who can get in come out with testimonies from children about the conditions and strict rules enforced, they allege, under the threat of being held here even longer.
And we must speak out.
Families are wondering what next, with mass deportations threatened and then postponed. This young girl says she's here to ask the senator for help and is warmly embraced.
So what is your message to this little girl?
President Trump is pointing the finger away from himself and his controversial policies.
The tragedy playing out on our border is the predictable result of Democrats' twisted obsession with open borders policy.
Democrats lay the blame squarely with the president, and so America is split.
This is not a shelter. This is a prison.
Not moral, said this presidential hopeful. She and others will point to these fences and ask voters to decide if this is the America they choose. So tonight, the consequences of President Trump's border crackdown will be discussed prime time in the first Democratic TV debate. The field is split, so the second debate will take place tomorrow evening, and that will feature the front-runner, the former Vice President Joe Biden. But this will come up, and Democratic presidential candidates will be saying that Donald Trump now has a record to defend. If this is a crisis, they will be saying it is his crisis, not just the Remain in Mexico policy, which is keeping asylum seekers the other side of the border, and the questions about conditions in camps there and what it prompts desperate asylum seekers to do, but also facilities like this one and the one in Clint, Texas. What about the conditions here? And so it is forcing Americans to confront maybe a difficult reality. And the question is now, how many minds will that change?
Kieran, thank you very much. Well, Chiara Cardelletti is the UNHCR's Deputy Regional Representative to the United States of America and the Caribbean, and she joins us now from Washington, D.C. Chiara Cardelletti, there was global outrage when the image of the Syrian refugee Alan Kurdi was broadcast around the world. Now, this new, horribly tragic image of a father and daughter, will anything change, do you think, as a result?
Well, the situation is tragic, and these pictures that we're seeing all over the news is really calling on us, and it's very heartbreaking. It's very difficult to accept similar pictures being portrayed in the media again. we are surely hoping that similar pictures will awaken the conscience of all governments in the region, for everybody to really take these issues very seriously and try and find quickly some solutions for people fleeing violence in Central America.
What kind of solutions would you be calling for?
We have been calling for regional solutions that aim at ensuring that persons who are seeking protection can find it as closely as possible to home, and that find it in a way that is humane and that provides meaningful reception and safety to people, so that they don't have to undertake a dangerous journey like the one we have seen happening over the past months and years, and that resulting in the tragic picture that is in front of us.
I mean, obviously, this is one horrible individual story, but are more migrants dying? Is your sense that in the last year or so this has stepped up or not?
We have this situation at the southern border, but not just at the southern border, throughout the region, across the migrant pathway, has been going on for several years now. Clearly, the numbers are growing, and the humanitarian situation is getting more and more concerning, with a lot more families, a lot more children moving, and with the resulting consequences that we're seeing. So it's a combination of, between the dangers along the way and the growing number of people fleeing.
And is Donald Trump's crackdown on immigration partly to blame, do you think, as his critics claim?
What we're looking at the moment is a regional crisis of people fleeing persecution and people fleeing violence in large numbers. And this is a situation that needs to be addressed by all governments in the region. One government alone cannot handle this. So we are really calling on all countries in the region to come together in a meaningful way and rapidly come up with an action plan to address this growing number of people moving across the continent.
So building walls is not going to solve the problem, it's tackling its source.
Absolutely. Looking at the root causes of why so many children and why so many women and families are fleeing Central America is something that is of the utmost urgency. The growing number of the changing of profile in the population flees is indicating very clearly that people are fleeing because they find themselves at risk and in danger. And these situations need to be addressed if we want the situation at borders to be addressed.
Just to come back to my first question, I mean, Alan Kurdi's, that image, there was outrage, but it didn't really feed into anything. What is your best hope that this one will actually achieve change?
Governments have been working in addressing this problem over the past years. However, there are needs for much more resolute efforts, efforts that look at the problem comprehensively, from people are fleeing and tackling those, to managing better reception, to managing better local integrations of people who are fleeing, and giving people hope and giving people a reason to stay where they have sought protection. This is what we are calling for, a comprehensive regional program that looks and tackles at all the aspects of this problem in a comprehensive way, so that we do not have to see pictures like this again.
Chiara Cardelletti, thank you very much for joining us.